Assalamu alaikum. The question is, who do you worship? This is a question that many people ask themselves, and unfortunately, many people don't ask themselves. This is a question that goes to the heart of how we conduct our life in accordance with the first belief or the first declaration of Islam, which is La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. There is no deity except Allah. That's the first part of the declaration of Shahada in Islam. Of course, it is very important to really reflect on this. I'm reminded of a very funny story. A friend of mine, let's call him Albert, he used to be a business associate of mine. And one day we were traveling from my home state to Washington, D.C. in the U.S. And it's a long flight, 3-4 hours. And I was reading something, I can't remember exactly what I was reading, but it caught his attention, and he suddenly said, Hani, I know a lot about your religion. I said, about what? He says, yeah, about Islam. I know a lot. I said, how come, Albert? He says, yeah, I've read a lot about Malcolm X and how he became Muslim and how he, what kind of challenges he had in his life and how he became convinced. And I said, wow, this sounds like you really know exactly what's right and what's wrong here. He says, yeah, I do. I said, do you believe in God? He says, yeah, I do. God knows I believe in God. I said, how come you're not Muslim, Albert? Of course, it wasn't my right to ask that question, but we were close enough where I could ask him that question. And his answer really surprised me with his honesty. He says, I just like pork chops and alcohol too much. And I said, okay, that's how you're gonna go. So that story sort of made me understand that there are people who they believe in God, they believe on themselves that they believe in God, but they really don't carry out their life. Of course, this is a silly story, but those people, some people don't conduct their life in accordance with their belief. Albert, for all I knew, was an honest man, etc., etc., but he was frank enough to know that he was not ready to live within the confines of what it means to believe in one God, at least according to Islam and the Quran. So the conclusion is, there are some people who they believe in God, but yet they feel free to conduct their life not in accordance with that belief. And the question then becomes, how do you know who you worship? In our tradition, in our Islamic tradition, there is an old saying. It's reported to be from the earliest companions of the Prophet ﷺ, but we're not sure who actually was the first to say it. And the saying goes, "Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu." He who knows himself knows his Lord. In other words, he knows whom he worships. The answer, according to the Quran, is La ilaha illallah. This is the first declaration of faith in Islam. This is the first tenet of faith. La ilaha illallah. The question that always struck me whenever I utter that tenet is, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teach us to say it in a form that is double negative? There is no deity except Allah. No, except. Why isn't it simply that there is one God? No, it's not that simple. The first part and the hardest part of that declaration of faith is to cleanse oneself from false deities, from associating with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some people go about conducting their life accepting bribery, cheating, depriving others of justice, defrauding others, even stealing, and some even, commit, crimes, more violent crimes, all while believing that they are truly believers in God. They continue their life, they falsely accuse people, they defame them. They have no problem carrying out all sorts of actions and taking decisions that do not please Allah. And yet they strongly believe in Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Bayyinah teaches us, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying they were only ordered to worship Allah sincerely. In other words, do you have the sincerity inside of you alive all day long? Do you listen to that conscience, that repository of values and principles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us in the Quran? Do you have that repository, the conscience, alive and not muted, not silent? Are you listening to it? Are you putting too much priority to your job ahead of your obligations toward Allah and the values and norms He taught us? Are you putting too much priorities for collecting money? Are you putting too much priority in terms of your family? Are you putting too much priority to giving time and yielding to friends who may be steering you in the wrong way? Are you actually committed more to your habits and cultural practices than actually obeying and submitting and pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? All of these questions you need to answer when you take time to be self-reflecting, thinking, self-analyzing, to take the time to be silent and honest and clear-minded with yourself, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will guide you to the right answer to that question. Who do you worship? Thank you for watching.